Hello, welcome to the fourth episode of Creative University video series. My name is Jennifer Greenjack. I'm standing in for Lauren this week. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Creative MMS in Philadelphia. I'm here today with the super fabulous Jim Van Horn, who is Creative's SEM Program Manager. Jim, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Jennifer. Let's see. I started in the industry about a little over 10 years ago, a little over a decade, but I've been in marketing ever since college. I got my start in paid search and data analytics, and then slowly kind of started to fold in most aspects, everything from social media distribution, SEO, down to programmatic and email marketing.
Great. Well, today we're here to specifically talk about GA4 and how to prepare for the change coming this summer of 2023. So why don't we get started with a couple of questions. First, why is Universal Analytics, or the Google Analytics that we know today, being transitioned to Google Analytics 4, also being known as GA4?
Let's see. Well, aside from naturally, Google updates their platforms pretty regularly. Sometimes it's an existing platform you update behind the scenes. This happens to be a big transition or shift away to where they're actually sunsetting legacy and they're moving forward with only the GA4 property after July 1st of this year. The main reasons, there's really two huge reasons why they're doing it. One is centered around user privacy and data security. In the past, they kind of got around that by anonymizing user content, giving it a big query number that was just a bunch of strings, but ultimately, very savvy data engineers and hackers were still able to get those anonymized addresses or anonymized data points and actually apply it to real world scenarios. So to kind of increase that level of security for the consumer, they kind of took that out of the equation. So it helps enhance the user privacy, but it also helps prepare for a cookieless world in the future. I'm sure everybody's heard that more and more platforms, like Apple iOS was the first one to implement it, but more and more, and even Google at some point will roll into the idea of no longer tracking a user throughout their online journey by placing cookies on sessions so they can see all the behavior and all the content that they consume along their journey through online. So basically shifting it from being cookie tracking, which is how the current iteration, GA3 or legacy exists. GA4 is going to be based more primarily off of modeling. So, the big question is, well, if we take cookies out of it, how do we know where users are coming from? And the solution that Google came up with was it's kind of a mix. It's a lot of first party data, actual hits on the website, not users necessarily, but hits on the website that they then apply all their modeling and all their algorithms to help give a clearer picture of clean data for how users engage with the website. Because at the end of the day, it's not necessarily as important to see a single person when you have 100,000 hits on your website a month on what that one person does. What's more important from a business standpoint is seeing the overall impact. If you do a redesign, you want to know that it gets more traffic than the old design, or the customer base likes it because they engage with it more than they did with the old design. It's not necessarily all the way down to that level of needing to find that singular user and trying to figure out what they did specifically on your website.
Got it. And it's a shame too, because I love good cookies.
I know, me too. It's a shift.
Yep. So now that we know the why, I guess, behind it, what are some of the new features that GA4 is going to bring? And what are maybe some of the features that are going to be lost once legacy is no more?
So some of the features, I'll deal with what's being lost first, because I think that was the biggest shock that a lot of marketers or even internal business employees that handle the day-to-day data measurement or analytics tracking saw. Was it's really easy today to go into Google Analytics and tell them, I do or don't want to track this specific traffic source. You can put in filters that apply for like internal usage, for dev departments, marketers themselves, or even internal employees of a business outside of an agency. It helps you kind of negate that traffic out so it doesn't skew results. Today, that's a very easy process. With GA4, though, that's something that kind of disappears. And it's more Google telling you we can understand what internal traffic means. So it's kind of like a pre-applied filter. And it's one of those scenarios of time will tell if it's 100% accurate, or maybe down the road they will give that functionality back to us. But as it stands right now, that's one thing that we're going to lose. As I mentioned previously too, we lose kind of that honed in look at individual user journeys and how one one anonymized person might engage with your website, in lieu of creating a modeling system around how everybody enjoys your website and engages with it to impact performance. Some of the features that are gained though from GA4 that are very difficult right now to track with the legacy analytics is with GA4, one of the biggest shifts was it merged application and web. Today, if you wanted to set up, like say you launch an application tomorrow, it's extremely difficult to track if somebody's on your website and then they engage with your application and then they kind of bounce back and forth between it. It's really difficult to tell the engagement, because sometimes it'll pick up two different users or two different sessions, because it's based on two different tracking principles too. Currently, Google uses Firebase SDK for app tracking, and of course the UA tracking code with cookies on websites. So you're really trying to bridge the gap between two different reporting principles, whereas GA4 kind of took all of that guesswork out. So when you set up a GA4 account, it automatically, now of course this is applicable only if you have like a downloadable application that somebody would download from like the App Store or Google Play Store, but it combines the measurements. So it's just one code across all your digital properties that then Google models to show you the full clear picture of, like, maybe this individual visited 5 pages on your website, then they downloaded your app, and then even within the app they use these features, or if there are multiple levels to your app, like maybe it's a resource app and they visited all these different resource pieces, then it will relay that information back within the same analytics platform, so you can optimize more holistically instead of trying to create two different silos of here's how my website performs and here's the engagement our app downloads are getting.
Got it. Got it. When will people need to make the switch from legacy or universal analytics to GA4?
Well, I know us here at the agency, we kind of got prepared very early on, because through a lot of the literature and a lot of the forums that we regularly review, it was kind of one of those a highly recommend kind of ideas of, why don't you set it up now? Because knowing that it sunsets in July, if you wanted to do year over year reporting, for instance, to say, take a look at August 2023 versus 2022, the only way you'd be able to do that this year would be if you had set it up last year. So we kind of put the, our own dead date, if you will, to transition, or at least create an additional property for GA4 across all our client accounts last year before July hit. So we have that full year over year picture when we're making a comparison, because when the shift happens, what a lot of individuals, businesses, agencies may see if they're not prepared and they wait till the 11th hour and say, June 30th, they're like, okay, we'll create the account now, and it just starts tracking data on July 1st with no historical implications. Then eventually when Google shuts it down completely, and this is something, that they do often. They bounce back and forth between release dates, sunset dates, how long you can download something. You can import, then you can't export. You can't export, but you can import. So it's kind of like a moving target as far as Google's concerned. But as it stands now, the best recommendation to give is, if you don't already have it set up and you confirmed it's tracking properly today, do it as soon as possible, because come July 1st, if you're trying to even take a look at month over month comparison data, it's not going to be accurate. It's not going to be a clean connection, because even some of the existing metrics that carry over, like for instance, users right now is anybody that hits the website and is at least on there long enough for the analytics code to load, then it's registering that as one. It's saying that that's one user. That definition shifts with GA4. So just landing on the website is no longer good enough. That active user doesn't register you on the website until you're there for at least 10 to 15 seconds and or visit a second page or engaged with it, like hit a play button on a video, downloaded like a white paper, submitted a form, things like that, like action items. went pages deep or were actually on there for at least, a little bit of time, 10 to 15 seconds, then it will register an active user. So I kind of like the way it's redefining the metrics, because a lot of times you'd see these metrics or data come out that would say you had 1,000 site hits yesterday, but you had 100% bounce rate. So technically speaking, all 1,000 of those site visitors could have been like irrelevant clicks, or clicks that were accidental where they didn't mean to. They got to the website and they're like, oh no, this isn't what I want, so I'm going to leave. So before, how it is today is it would just record one user with 100% bounce rate. How it will be recorded with GA4 would be, since they kind of disappeared immediately and they didn't engage at all with the website, it wouldn't even count them.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't impact your engagement rate, which is kind of the new version of bounce rate, which is just kind of inverted. Bounce rate being kind of Google telling you when somebody does not engage with your site. Engagement rate is just Google telling you when they do engage with your site. So just kind of like an inverted principle. But at least it gives you a clearer picture of knowing when people act, knowing when people engage, and actually counting the users that mean to be on your site as opposed to those accidental clicks.
Got it. So sticking with the positive in this kind of sense, where we're not focusing on the negative of bounce rate, but we're focusing on the positive of how long somebody wants to be engaged with your materials, in this case, your website. Trying to remain positive in this conversation, how long do you think the data will be stored in Universal Analytics? Has there been any conversations about that?
There hasn't been any hard set date, at least not that I've seen recently come out from Google. Some of the early kind of, I guess you could say, windows that Google had put out last year was around a 6-month cutoff. So you'd have access to your data for up to 6 months afterwards. But it's a moving target, because even when all this came out, like I think it's going on 2 years now, I think October of, no, maybe longer, October of 2020, I think was when it was first announced. But when you go back to that point in time, it was a clear cutoff. It made it look like legacy analytics or GA3 is dead on June 30th at 11:59, and GA4 is taking over officially at 12:01 July 1st, and that's it. Your data's lost, it's gone forever, and all you have is GA4 from that point forward. Now that's evolved. Feedback from the community, especially larger publishers, larger websites, and larger clients, that just it's not feasible to kind of download all of that data to recreate in a whole new platform. So while they're saying right now it's adjusted to like a 6-month window, so by end of 2023, at least for most regular analytics customers, Analytics 360, which is the enterprise version of Google Analytics, they're extending it by a year. So they get an extra year pad, July 1st, 2024 for those clients. But for most individuals, by end of 2023, I just kind of get it in your mind that all this data is going to disappear. So how do I want to preserve it? So Google is stepping up, and they are making some changes. Like, for instance, they had an auto migration, which would auto migrate your existing account over into a new GA4 property that occurred earlier this month. And they also gave the option and the ability to essentially download all your existing analytics data that you might have, upload it into BigQuery, and then export it out of BigQuery into your GA4 account. So they're kind of starting to put in stopgaps and measures to help businesses out, help agencies out. So it's not kind of one of those, it's the 11th hour and I forgot to do this, or I didn't have time to do it, or there's been issues with doing it. So they're at least giving the fallback of, if you have, if you're at the deadline and you haven't migrated over yet and you don't even know what you're doing yet, all else be said, you can create a BigQuery account, you can store your data there until you're ready, then just export it out into GA4 when you are.
That's great. Now, I know you mentioned too earlier that if somebody hasn't created a GA4 property as of yet, they should do it ASAP so that they can start gathering data in GA4. Are there any other things that people should prepare for before the transition happens?
Yes, especially with if you're setting up GA4 for the first time. I mean, number one would definitely be get used to the interface. Again, this is not just like a reiteration of the platform. This is in all sense a new Google Analytics tracking platform. So it takes some getting used to, the things on the left-hand tree are not where they should be. They're not even named the same thing. And the first impact, at least I saw that I noticed, was I'm so used to just going that left-hand tree in GA3 and having all these options available to me, taking a look at acquisition data, on-site engagement behavior data, conversion data, audience data, all that was just right there at your fingertips. Whereas in the new interface, there's limited options, because of the modeling, because of the fact that we're not really honing in or collecting the type of data we used to, that it takes some getting used to. So I'd say the first step is just get in there, use it, poke around, make sure it's tracking the data. Number one, just make sure it's tracking the data.
Yeah.
And then as it is, just kind of look and compare and contrast it next. Once you get comfortable with it, where the information is, start comparing and contrasting. Like I know the biggest thing that we dealt with at the agency using it as a KPI, and a lot of our clients use it as a KPI, is bounce rate. So, it's not the end all that bounce rate isn't in GA4, but it took some discussions and it took some brainstorming of how do we take this KPI of bounce rate, that's a measure of if a user is engaging with your website, but reflect that in GA4 where there isn't bounce rate. So, of course, they have the average engagement rate, but it's not the same thing. So it takes a little getting used to. So secondly, I'd say take a look at what's important to you today and see how it's portrayed in GA4, how it flows in there. Because the next part is step 3 would be, if you don't see the information you need housed in GA4 today, it's not saying that you can't get it, because it is extremely flexible. You can create your own dimensions. You can even create your own metrics if you want to, and you can include it within any kind of default reporting or custom reporting that you might create. So if you do see something, it just takes some legwork, figuring out, well, how's this calculated now in legacy? And then you could just import that. You can add that to GA4. You could create your whole dimensions, your own metrics that kind of duplicate or match GA3 as it stands today, depending on how ambitious you are. And that kind of leads me into almost like the fourth and final thing, is for those that leverage custom reporting heavily in Google Analytics, that don't count on the default tables and the default graphs, that have their own combination of custom reports. And I've seen some, trust me, some it can be lengthy, or there's, dozens of these different custom reports built in GA3. I'd start working on that now. Because like I said, sometimes with those custom reports, when you get into it, it's not going to be as simple as just recreating that custom report in the new analytics interface. You may have to go a step further and create those custom metrics or custom dimensions that feed into your custom report, because that can start tracking immediately as well. So you kind of don't miss a beat when a changeover happens.